Hey everybody, welcome to the Plex interview. I'm joined by Matt Binder. He's the host of Doomed with Matt Binder, also former producer of The Majority Report, which is a favorite of mine. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us. I guess before we get started with the subject at hand, do you want to tell people a little bit about Doomed and where they can find it and all that great stuff?
Yeah, sure. You can find my show, Doomed with Matt Binder, at doomedpod.com. Or you can also, for the YouTube live stream, go to doomed.tv. Basically, I host, a leftist podcast that talks about politics and culture and all the fun stuff you hear about in the news. But it's got you could say a focus on the right when it comes to their weird conspiracy theories and, just weird internet stuff that, you could find on the corners of the web. The dark corners of the web, I should say. Not the intellectual dark web, although we have done episodes on that, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, it sounds right up our alley around here. We do a lot of conspiracy theory on our show. And just real quick, for anybody who's maybe a fan of Matt's and maybe not familiar with what we do here at Echoplex, our main show on Sunday is live at 7 p.m. Pacific. And we cover some of the news, just the low-hanging fruit. We'll make a little fun of Pat Robertson. We don't cover any Trump. No Trump on the show, no Trump clips, nothing. People are kind of inundated with that. But we cover things kind of outside of his orbit, religious nutters, conspiracy theorists, specifically chemtrails, but not the theories themselves because they've been so roundly debunked that now we go the TMZ route and we kind of cover the celebrity conspiracy theorists inside of that movement, which is great fun because they get very angry and they're very likely to call because they're kind of crazy. So
Right.
So,
well, being that you guys don't cover Trump at all, I think anyone listening to this show right now should have a light bulb going on in their head and go to themselves, wow, there's an opening in the market. Maybe I should be the only show that talks about Trump.
We thought about doing that instead. We almost called it, we were going to call it The Situation because the situation is a little bit grim, but we decided that it would be okay to let Rachel Maddow handle that. She's an all right broadcaster. She's almost as good as we are. So.
Right. Hey, someone's got to talk about Russia, right?
Oh man. There's something there, but I think she's going to fatigue a lot of people on that if they listen every day.
Right.
It's really easy to get fatigued watching the news every day. That's why I try not to do it. I just listen to a few podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, you're the former producer of basically the one that I make sure I don't miss. It's Sam and Everybody, The Majority Report. I forget,
right.
What year did you start with working with that? Were you there at the beginning when the podcast version started? Or I believe they had a different producer when it started.
I came in a few months after they started. He got the first producer, I believe, was Dorsey, who is with BuzzFeed now. He was a producer with the old Majority Report on Air America. And Sam wanted to start the podcast. So he called up one of his old Air America producers, or I think actually they were pushing him to do it. And they got Evan, who was another guy who was sort of like the audio expert in terms of setting up all the live stream stuff. Now, remember, this is in 2010 before, podcasting is the norm. So there was no simple solution at the time to, of course, you could always just grab a mic and record something on your computer, but they wanted to do the professional, full-blown, studio quality audio plus the video live stream. Plus, it had to be streaming the audio live so people could listen to it on their phones or whatever. So they got, they did all that stuff. And then a few months after the first episode, Dorsey left, and that's when I joined. That was in, I believe the show started in November of 2010, the podcast version, and I was there from April 2011 on till October 2015. Jeez, it's a long time.
Yeah, it's almost been 3 years. Did you have a background in broadcasting prior to that?
I did not. No, I went to film school. I joined up with them, I guess, 2 years after I was out of school. So, I mean, I guess if you want to consider film, but I wasn't like, I didn't do any TV broadcasting or radio broadcasting. I mean, at my college, I hosted like an hour of like radio on their college network that spanned like a radius of 2 blocks or something like that. But besides that, no, that was the beginning of my broadcasting experience.
So I'm going to operate under the assumption that you kind of learned a lot about audio production while you were over at Majority Report, because you were the guy who, the joke was that especially Michael didn't understand the audio equipment, but you kind of got trial by fire then on audio broadcasting, didn't you?
Yeah. I joined up originally just as like a producer / social media / YouTube guy, in terms of like, running the feeds and running the YouTube channel, stuff like that. But then shortly after I joined, maybe a few months, I ended up taking over the audio producing duties, as well as the regular producing duties I was doing already in terms of content. So yeah, it was like pretty much, and I had like experience as playing music. Not, I don't consider myself a musician because I don't read music, but I was in a punk band, and we would play music at shows and stuff and record. So I felt like I had an ear for at least some of it, in terms of this sounds good, this sounds bad, this is how I could fix this. I had ways of finagling with whatever I needed to figure it out.
Well, there's a lot less concern with the dynamics and stuff on a talk show. Like, if you're recording a band, you can't just, like, you can set it compression and whatnot a lot more aggressively on a talk radio show than you can for a guitar. You'll take all the flavor out of the guitar if you over compress it. Did you ever totally fuck up when you guys were live?
All the time.
I mean like disastrously fucked up where you felt bad, not just like I made this little mistake and nobody could hear the following thing, like, because I don't think I ever heard that, but I'm not sure I caught every episode you produced.
No, I guess never. Any mess up that had to do with the show not being able to air, usually it was like the FiOS went down or something like that. It was never like I pulled the wrong cord out of the socket or something. No, yeah, it was all the usual fuck ups were not having a piece of audio ready to go or something stupid like that. Never something that required the show to be unable to air.
Well, that's good. That's good. So was like learning to audio engineer a live show maybe the thing that you learned that you or the most important thing, I guess, or most valuable thing you learned over at Majority Report, or was it something else?
I mean, I would actually say the politics side of it, actually. I mean, I was always progressive, but as you get older, you learn more, you read more, and you either, you figure out where you lie even more so. And I would say, like, I was always very political because I was into punk rock, and specifically into like, political punk bands. And this is in, junior high. And then through high school, I got more into it. And then college, even more into it, especially with the Bush years. And, in 2010, I would say I was probably, calling myself a liberal or a progressive. But then when I joined the Majority Report, I realized, just how much more there was, like just how much further I can go. Like, in terms of like the Democrats are bad too. Like in 2010, right before I joined, the main thing to go after was like to protect the Democrats from the Tea Party insurgency, and then, I joined the Majority Report. And, that same year, too, was Occupy. That first year I was at the Majority Report. And I would say just everything from, listening to Sam, working with him, and then Occupy happening. I would say, like, the same way the 9/11 radicalized me, and then the war in Iraq and the Bush years radicalized me. Working at the Majority Report and Occupy radicalized me even more so. So I went from, to, generic liberal to, generic Democrat to like more liberal to like full on progressive, and then far leftist, like if you want to like give it a name, like a socialist. So the progression was there, and working at that show definitely was part of it.
You mentioned 9/11 as a moment of radicalization. Maybe we'll probably get into some more of this stuff later.
Not the same way, maybe.
That's what I was going to ask, because I feel like there's a lot of people that might come up later in this conversation who are also radicalized by 9/11, but probably not in the same way that you're going to say you were.
Right. I mean, I was also thinking that, I too became a terrorist or something like that. No, but I was like, this Osama guy's got some good ideas. Never heard of him. No, but 9/11, especially, I think, being the age I was when 9/11 happened, I was a sophomore in high school. It was something where, and I was already into, politics. As much as I don't even know how old I was, 14, 15-year-old could be, at the time, without the internet being in full swing, with Twitter and Facebook making every piece of news so easily, discoverable right in front of you. I saw what was going on, and I didn't like it, and I could see in how people were acting in school, the fake patriotism, the flags everywhere all of a sudden, the things people were saying about Muslim people, Middle Eastern people, Arab people. And, the news stories, I distinctly remember that news story. It always comes up, I feel like, every year around 9/11, but I distinctly remember when it happened. I can't remember. I'm having a mental block. Can't remember the guy's name right now. But there was an Indian man working at a 7-Eleven a few days after 9/11 who was murdered because they assumed he was Muslim, which obviously makes it wrong either way. But, they saw this dark-skinned fellow from that part of the world, and he got killed just working his job at 7-Eleven. I remember when that happened and just thinking, we are like a screwed up country now. This is like that really was, I guess, like a moment where, at 14, 15 years old, I'm like, what is going on? And I remember distinctly, people, Halloween was a couple of weeks later, and parents not letting kids out in the neighborhood, and could tell just from the years before and then that year and the years after that it never really was the same in New York in terms of people like to bring up how New Yorkers handled it. Of course, grown adults went on about their business, but in my part of New York, Queens, where people could be a little bit more closed-minded in certain parts of Queens, I would say people handled it not as well.
No, that's funny you should mention Halloween coming up, because the thing that I remember the most about 9/11 was going to, because I live in the Bay Area, and we went to Halloween in the Castro when that was still a thing, and I remember there being fucking snipers on the balconies of apartments, and I was like, this is pretty fucking scary. What the fuck is this?
Right.
Why are there snipers here?
Right, and we never really obviously there's still not probably snipers on those balconies, but I mean we never really shed ourselves of this ridiculousness that stemmed from 9/11. I mean, we're still making 80-year-old women take off their shoes before they could board a plane. I mean, it's ridiculous. Right.
And all the while, we have a lot, if I'm not too terribly, if I'm going to meet a violent end in America, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be from a foreign terrorist organization,
Right. And another funny thing, now that you bring that up, I always love when it's someone, you could see someone's uncomfortable with if they're on a plane and there's some guy wearing a turban or something. And it's like, let me tell you something, buddy. Every one of these terrorist attacks, there was no one dressed in the traditional garb. Even if going on your level, what is wrong with you? You're so all those terrorists were all people anyone who ever tried to do any sort of terrorist activity, they're all dressed like you and me, trying to blend in. Like, what are you, like, just wearing like a t-shirt and a pair of shorts? Like, I always laugh when I see someone, like, you could tell someone's giving like someone, dressed in their native, wherever they're from, clothing, and they're like looking at them like, are they gonna do something? No, buddy, just mind your own business. Shut up.
Right, this isn't a cartoon, right? It's not like the Arab guy from the Bugs Bunny cartoon that's going to come blow you up, like,
right?
Because that's just really poor strategy. Like, you're going to get caught.
Exactly. Yes.
Like, if everybody's casting a sideways eye at you, that's a good sign that you're not going to be a good covert operative.
Right. Like, what do you think? He's got like some TNT under his turban or something? Like, give me a break, buddy. That guy's probably the safest guy to be around, because the way he dresses probably gave him the most scrutiny when trying to get through TSA. I'll guarantee that. So that guy got through TSA. You want to be next to him. He's the safe guy, actually. Probably the safest one on the least likely to do anything.
And if you're sitting next to him and you say hi and you're of a mind where those people are bad, you might fucking learn something too.
Right.
Because it's just a guy. Like, it's just some guy that has somewhere to go on a plane. He probably doesn't want to be there any more than you do. He's just trying to go wherever he's trying to go. That's just the way it is. Like, on a plane, man, I am not looking for terrorists, man. I'm like, how long is this flight, and when the fuck am I going to get where I'm going? Because I ain't on the plane to, like, observe humanity and stuff. It's a really bad place to observe humanity.
Right.
Doesn't matter who you are. You're not going to be at your best on a flight that's over an hour.
Oh yeah, of course.
So, one of the first times I kind of noticed where you were coming from, and that you were sort of following this men's rights thing, where the way I was, well, there were two things I noticed. One, you brought up Gamergate a lot of times on the Majority Report, and I don't want to say that you were dismissed so much, because that's like not really how the dynamic of the show operated, but it certainly wasn't, your level of concern was not matched by the other people in the studio.
Right. They let me talk about it. Like, it's, we were, when Michael and I hosted when Sam was out, and it became more and more to the point where we started hosting regularly. And not because Sam all of a sudden was out more. It was actually like Sam, we filled in for Sam a few times. He realized people enjoyed having that, that one episode a week that's a bit different than the rest. And we made it sort of a regular thing.
Well, I mean, he has kids and stuff too, so it's like, it's good for him. It's good for everybody, and it gave you guys some experience. The first time you guys hosted together, I do remember it, and me and my friend Randall, who would kind of always, message each other about the show or whatever, were like, that was great.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I honestly don't even remember the first time. I do know that I would say, like, I remember specifically the last show Michael and I hosted before I left. I remember thinking on that show, I was like, I finally found I finally got comfortable. Like, I finally felt 100%. Like, it took that long, and of course I'm leaving now.
Well, that's okay. So when did you, like, because when Gamergate first started, I can't imagine anybody seeing that and immediately thinking, oh my God, this is fucking scary. Like, do you remember at what point during that it occurred to you that this wasn't just some group of stupid people, like, overreacting to something, but that they were almost organizing when they were dogpiling on people, that it started to, do you remember any specific time or how far into it it kind of occurred to you that this was a little more than just some gamer prank that had gone out of control?
Right. I remember specifically when it started in August of that year. Jeez, I'm having a mental block. What year was that? Was it 2014, I want to say?
I was going to say 2013. I mean, whatever. The people that are listening to this have a computer. They can look it up.
Right. So August of that year, that's when it all started. And it started as that, I don't know if you remember, Five Guys burger and fries, I think was the whole hashtag or whatever, but it was Five Guys. And the whole reason for that was because it was their little punny way. And I mean, the sexist, harassing gamers who wanted to make this an issue. They heard that this indie developer who literally made a free text-based game that got covered, and she was a woman. She is a woman. She made this game, and it got covered in a few places because it was interesting. It was called Depression Quest, and developer's name is Zoe Quinn, and it got some attention because it was an interesting game, interesting idea. And they found out apparently that she knew or had a relationship with one of the writers at Kotaku, and that meant that the only reason they covered it on there was because of their relationship. And then they somehow found or fit in their bizarre heads that she had a relationship with 4 other people who also had some sort of power in talking about this game or something. So they said that she slept with these 5 guys, and that's why they called it Five Guys, and they harassed her over it. And she did it for a video game review for a game that she made 0 money on. And I just remember thinking when I saw this, like, this is insanity. This is crazy. But I did not believe at that point that it was anything more than this, like, you know, this 4chan internet bullshit. Interesting to me, something I always pay attention to. I do follow that stuff, but I felt, you know, I probably at that point did not consider talking about it on the show. Although I probably did a few weeks later when it really started to come off the 4chan boards and like the IRC chats and start to spread into like mainstream social networks. And that's when like the whole you know, dogpiling and people, you know, the movement of Gamergate started to grow in terms of, you know, once you get it on, you know, once this stuff starts being talked about more on Twitter and Facebook than it is being talked about on, you know, the dark corners of the web, like I mentioned before, like on 4chan or some like IRC chat, then you know, like, this is going to have legs. And I remember when Adam Baldwin, the guy who plays Jane in Serenity, Firefly, he's the one who called it Gamergate. And the whole idea behind that, I don't think he was in on why to call it Gamergate. But the whole plan, I remember seeing these chat logs, was that these guys who started it, these misogynists who started it, and her ex-boyfriend who's also spread all this stuff, and that's really how it all started too. Don't want to forget about him. This all really began because the guy got dumped and wanted to have revenge on his ex, and he spread this word about the 5 guys or whatever, and that's why she got the video game reviews, and that's how it all started. They realized that this was starting to have legs, so they decided a movement where we're just harassing this girl because of a disgruntled ex is clearly, even to people who might have our leanings, is clearly misogynistic, and maybe they won't get involved because, you know, they won't publicly get involved because, you know, they have mothers and maybe daughters and maybe wives, probably not wives or daughters, but
well, maybe daughters, but definitely not a wife.
Yeah, right. Had to get that in there
anymore, anyway.
Right. But you know, maybe they won't jump in on this. So they very clearly, it was all a ploy. This whole what was it? What's the line they always used to use? That was a joke. Integrity for gaming journalism or bullshit like that. I can't remember the joke.
Yeah,
line.
I think it was they tried to make it like it was about like the integrity of the journalism about games, as if like there aren't a billion paid reviews and shit going on in that industry at the time and currently. And the other thing, like when it all kind of busted out, the thing that occurred to me is like, if she's writing a game and she's sort of in that kind of game space, does it surprise anyone she might go on some dates with some gaming journalists? They're just kind of in the same place. They're going to be at the same things, and you're going to meet people. This is like not even
exactly
anything.
What you have are a bunch of people who, along with being misogynists, and we find out later on, surprise, surprise, they're also racists, and they're also, some of them, a good portion of them, white supremacists, and they're hard right-wingers, far right-wingers, and they're conspiracy theorists. These people also have little to no idea how journalism works, and how, yes, if you're a journalist and you're covering your niche or your beat or whatever, you ostensibly make friends with people who work in what you're covering. It's pretty much impossible not to at least have some sort of acquaintance. I mean, where do these people think they get their sources from? How do they think they get this insider information? Do they think some guy is just calling up a journalist and saying, I'm going to just possibly throw my career away and talk to this person who has no idea who I am and I don't know if I can trust them, and give them this insider information? No, they get sources from people. They get information from people who they end up befriending, or they have an acquaintance, or they're a friend of a friend, or who knows, but they learn about these people, they meet these people, they get to know these people, and that's how they're able to cover whatever their beat is. I mean, it's just basic journalism. It's nothing crazy. I mean, if they had some sort of proof, hard evidence that that there was actually some sort of something going on that wasn't on the up and up, they certainly never provided it.
Oh, and the other thing is, if something wasn't on the up and up about this girl's text-based game that she didn't make any money on, so what?
Right.
That was like my whole thing is like, so what if she is sleeping with people who are game reviewers and they gave her game a good review, and maybe they were a little biased because they know her and they wanted her game to succeed? So what?
Yeah, if like you just mentioned, there is a whole like pay to play in a lot of different beats and niches of journalism, but especially in the video game world, like there are major developers, literally hundreds of $1 million major corporations who give away tons of free shit, straight up sometimes give payment to people to cover their upcoming games. Those developers, you think, would be the creme de la creme to go after. They'd be that's who you'd set your sights on, not this one individual woman who's put together this text-based web game, and she's making $0 off of it.
Well, I mean, I think we both know what's going on here, is though she came into their space and got a little bit of attention, and that's just fucking not okay. And you add to that I'm not sure how it all came to be, but that some people who didn't like that she's in that gaming space, right, also ran into her ex, or maybe they all knew each other before. That kind of doesn't matter. But this all that happened is that are enough people in already male-dominated spaces who just don't think women belong there.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that was certainly a major part of it.
The gamer thing is nothing different, except they're just fucking stupid, because almost just as many women have been playing video games as men since video games.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just they don't make it it's not their culture. The video game culture was like heavily dominated by white men in their late teens and early 20s. So this girl coming in and maybe somehow being a part of their culture by writing a text-based game about depression that got a couple good reviews, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back there. It wasn't any of this integrity in journalism thing. It was, she's where she doesn't belong.
Right, exactly. And another part of this, actually, the reason why I've said this a lot, I've done a lot of different interviews about everything from incels, which we'll get to shortly, I'm sure, to this. I think a major part of it is that you have a group of people whose entire identity is wrapped up in this one thing. It's extremely unhealthy. It's not normal. There are millions of gamers now who also like certain type of music, who also like certain type of movies, who also have different hobbies, and they consider themselves gamers, and they play a ton of video games, I'm sure, but they also go out with friends and do this with friends, and they do this socialized activity. They play a sport maybe, or they don't even have to play a sport. They also read they watch anime or read comic books, and they go to Comic-Con with their friends and they dress up and have a good time. But no, you have an entire group of people who are just gamers. There's nothing else. They have no other identity. They are that's all they see themselves as if it's like their race or their gender. So if they see someone who they don't see as one of them, or they don't want in their little group, they somehow view this as some sort of racist or sexist attack, which is unbelievable to begin with. But like the craziness of it all is just like, it's really weird. And I really think that's a lot of what has to do with the problem in that gaming culture, because gaming is so big now. It's not some sort of small underground thing. It's not like, we're all nerds because we play video games. No, it's like a mainstream thing. Everyone plays video games now.
Well, and that culture has sort of gone the other way, where they kind of almost want to be jocks in some ways, because like, and or maybe we'll move into like the one of the other things I wanted to talk about here is how the men's rights activist lingo is sort of permeating fucking everything right now. Like gamers, people who identified as gamers started to pick up that you're a beta male, you're a cuck, sort of from that pickup artist men's rights activist scene. Like when people would disagree with them online or whatever, all of a sudden, if it was a man, you were white knighting and shit. It was a bizarre thing to watch, because I had been following up. We'll talk about Paul Elam in a minute. I'd been following Paul Elam's site since I don't know how long, maybe 2009. And at first I thought it was a joke. I was like, this has got to be a fucking joke. And it wasn't. But then when Gamergate popped up, and then you had mentioned it on Majority Report, I took a look into it, and I'm like, wait a minute, these people sound like the people on A Voice for Men.
Right. I think what happened here was that, and I think a lot of people downplay, I mean, no, that's not true. People don't downplay it, but I think they don't make the connection as much as they should. And that's the role of sites like Reddit in blurring these lines for these impressionable people who end up going from just being a gamer to being a men's rights activist or some sort of other far right-wing reactionary. And that's like, a lot of these guys are smart, and they realize that to appeal to some of these younger people, you got to make it a meme. Make it sound like, this isn't men's rights lingo. Beta male is what everyone on Reddit is calling their buddies when they're nagging on them or some shit. They're knocking them or some shit. And I think that's sort of how that really spread. They say it on, when they're playing video games or whatever. And I'm sure not all of those people who say it, because there's a lot more people who say that type of stuff now, even realize or know what a men's rights activist is. Because like I said, gaming is so big now. It's like, if you were to like place how many people who were hardcore members of Gamergate into the entire gaming community as a whole, it was really just such a small sliver. But their voice was so loud, it made it feel like, there were so many more.
Yeah, that seems about right. There were I was reading an article that said there might have been 5,000 people really kind of interested in it, but they were able to kind of drive the conversation about it, because Twitter was still pretty young back then too. And a lot of, it was pretty easy to get things going on Twitter back then versus now. Everybody's on Twitter now. Yeah. So I had brought up Paul Elam in A Voice for Men. I think that one of the strangest debates I've ever watched was you talking to Paul Elam.
I don't even know if you could call it a debate.
Well, no, it was this. You guys were like on this timer, like it was like a game of, they had that timer on the game of chess so that you didn't go over, but it wasn't really used that way. But
yeah, they had all sorts. Listen, when this is how this all came to be. I read about their first ever. I've been following the men's rights movement for a while. Actually, once again, here comes Reddit. I learned about it in like the early days of Reddit. Like it must have been one of the earlier. It really was on one of the earliest subreddits on Reddit, because as long as I knew about Reddit, which I'm pretty sure I was on there, if not right away, no more than a few months after that site launched. That subreddit, the MRA subreddit, was always there, and that's where I learned about men's rights activism, and I became aware of Paul Elam and A Voice for Men, but never really paid them specifically much attention. I knew his role in it, but it's easier to, for me, it's more interesting to see these guys, which they did on Reddit, interact with the general public than in their own little bubbles, which is basically Paul Elam's website, A Voice for Men. Like, who cares to see a bunch of these guys, talk back and forth, preaching to the choir. It's much more interesting to me to cover when these guys try to convert or something like that. So I was aware of him, and then he held his first ever men's rights conference, and I thought it was hilarious, and it was hilarious.
Yeah, it was. I watched some of it live. They had a little bit of a problem with their live stream, and live streaming. Like, I think they were on, was it Ustream or something back then? They were having some problems, and the commercials were like 100 times as loud as the stream, and it was sort of painful to watch. But I do remember watching that. It was. I watched it for the same reason you checked it out. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. I can't wait to see this.
All right. And so I covered on the Majority Report, and we put up the video as its own segment. And of course they found it. And Paul Elam, I guess, seeing me at the time, I look young to begin with, but back in 2014, maybe, I looked even younger. And he probably saw this young guy, this young kid, because I'm pretty sure that's what he called me. And so I said, I'll debate this guy and I'll make him look stupid or something. So he contacted me, and I'm pretty sure he put up with like an open challenge first, like a video, to make it seem like, they like to do this thing, I've noticed, where they'll put up this open challenge fully expecting the person they're challenging not to take it, because a lot of times people don't, because, I don't know, they don't feel like it's worth it, or they actually don't feel like they do good in a debate. I don't know why people don't take this stuff. I'm always open for it. I think it's fantastic when it happens.
I would personally give Paul Elam $1,000 to talk to me for an hour. That's how badly I want to fucking talk to that guy. So he don't give him $1,000 though. So I hope he doesn't. I hope nobody listens to this show. So I mean, he won't hear it. I don't think so. I won't. Nobody will hold me to that, I hope.
So he put out this challenge. I accepted, and they came at me with 100 different things I must accept, like a rider almost. Like, make sure you only leave me the brown M&Ms. So I had to agree to all these things. Number one, it was like, this is the format. It has to be like this. There'll be no. You heard my cat right there. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
So you'll this is the format. You got to do it this way. There'll be no talking over each other. We each get 5 minutes to say our piece back and forth. You go first, then me, then you, then me. There'll be no interjecting. We get our 5 minutes, blah, 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 blah. It has to be done on my channel because I don't trust you to air it correctly or to not do something if you feel like you're losing. Just all of a sudden, I guess he expected him to be destroying me or something and me to get all embarrassed and just shut down the debate by just closing the feed or something, which is ridiculous. I would never do that.
Oh, and you weren't in a position to do that. If you would have taken, for example, the debate and you would have done it on the Majority Report channel and you would have said this is an hour debate with Paul Elam and you shut it down in 15 minutes, you'd have had all your own fans pretty mad at you, right?
Right, exactly, yes. So I don't know what they were thinking, but I had to do it on their channel, so fine, I had no problem with that. Go ahead. Even if they want to pull some shit, I don't care. It'll only help me out in terms of making them look bad.
It also doesn't hurt that you think that they're a joke in the first place, so you don't care if they think you're stupid, right? It's you're holding a few more cards than they are, I think, in this scenario.
Exactly. So then he said we need a moderator, someone to call it down the line. And I believe I don't believe if I can't remember if he suggested someone up front or he asked me to suggest someone, but either way I was like, whatever, I don't care, you pick the moderator, I don't give a shit, it's not going to affect me one way or the other. So that down the middle unbiased moderator ended up being the guy who's the editor of his website, A Voice from Them.
Yeah. Well, there was nothing to moderate anyway because you guys were both on a clock. I mean, you could have not even done it live. He could have like recorded his statement, sent it over to you via email. You could have recorded your statement, sent it back to him over email. Like it was. Right.
Exactly. So I didn't even care. I was like, fine, we could do that. Fine. So the day comes. I did notice that I watched a few of his videos, and he had like 2 or 3 other debates with people, and while he was bad, they were bad too. I noticed that they all came in with a specific way of trying to convince these guys that, feminism is good for society, and the patriarchy is terrible, not just for women, but for everybody as well. And I agree with all those things, but I'm watching this and I'm going, these guys are falling flat. This is not the debate you have with this guy. First of all, like, if you, it would be 100 times more effective if there was a woman saying those things, debating him, which I don't believe I ever came across. Maybe he did debate a woman before. I don't know. I didn't see those videos. But also, even with that in mind, why are you going to tell you think you can convince Paul Elam and his viewers that the patriarchy is bad and feminism is good? Like, they're not going to give a shit. So I went in knowing right away that my game plan was none of these people are going to care what I have to say. If I'm trying to, my game plan is just to make them know that Paul Elam does not care about them. Like, he's a grifter. He's a scam artist. He bilks them of money for apparently men's causes to help men, and all his website does is attack women and complain about feminism. What do they do? What sort of activism do they do when it comes to issues that primarily affect men? Why aren't they out there advocating for prison reform? Why aren't they advocating? Why aren't they starting an anti-war movement? But no, they wouldn't do that because they're not real activists. They literally, the men's rights movement is literally just a bunch of angry white men who either hate women because they treat them like shit, or they hate women because they couldn't get a woman to go out with them because they treat them like shit, or they hate women because their wives left them because they treated them like shit. That's literally the crux of the movement. So I was like, these guys aren't going to care about feminism and what I have to say about progressive ideals, but I can teach them, show them, maybe open their eyes that Paul Elam is leading them astray and maybe hurt Paul Elam's bottom line. And I think I was successful in doing that in terms of, I went to their message board after the debate, and his own people, they hated me, but they sure thought that he screwed up the debate and allowed me to win, was, I believe, some of the things I was saying, I saw them saying there.
Well, it's because he's slightweight, dude. This guy's not a big thinker. Like, right. He's just telling a bunch of misogynists that they're right. The thing with the timer, there's like this analog going on right now where the way someone, if they think they're going to talk to somebody who disagrees with them, the first thing some of these people who want to be looked at as some kind of thought leader or critical thinker will do, the first thing they're going to try to do is narrow the range of the types of discussion that can be had so that it favors them. Right. If they're not able to, if they're like Paul Elam, who's not exactly the best at thinking on his feet, I would guess, then making sure you never have to respond to somebody else's follow-up question is a pretty good way of trying to narrow the debate down so that you don't ever have to be shown to not know what the fuck you're talking about. Right. And the funny thing is, like, hey, me personally, if I'm going to debate someone, I want to reel back and forth. For real, I want you to interrupt me to make your point, to answer something I said, so I can do that back to you. Otherwise, there's no conversation going on. That's how a debate works, in my view. But also, let's say you are a Paul Elam and you at least want to look good, but you have nothing. There are ways to control a debate. Like, there are ways, anyone who has any sort of media experience or training, there are ways you feel like,
it's not going your way, to take control of the debate without being so blatantly obvious to your own, let alone not even the people on the other side watching, your own viewership. Like, this guy had nothing. He didn't know how to debate me. He didn't know in both the content and in both the debate in general, like how to actually do one.
Yeah, I do remember at the end you were like begging him to respond to a question you were asking, and you're like, no, I'll cede my time. I want to ask you this question. I'm not sure if those are the exact words, and he didn't do it.
Right. Yeah, they didn't like that I was not listening to that debate format. I agreed to it because I knew he wouldn't debate me without doing it. But, I didn't take 5 minutes each time. What's the point of me going on a 5-minute monologue? I got my point in, and then I said, please take some of my time and say something, so then I could take back some of my time and respond to you, because this is just pointless. He never addressed anything I said, because he read from, and it's not a surprise. It's not like he had some sort of like teleprompter off screen. He very visibly was reading directly off a sheet of paper he had prepared for every one of his 5-minute time slots. There was never a point where there was never a point where, like, okay, the first time slot he read, and then I said something in mine, and then he was like, in his next one, he was like, well, let me address what Matt Binder said here. No. He completely ignored what I said, unless it was a moment where I ceded my time to him so I could get some sort of interaction. But other than that, whatever I would say would be completely ignored in his 5 minutes, because he just went back to reading his prepared notes.
Right. I think, that fools a lot of people, because he seems well prepared and well thought out. But anybody who's ever like been in an argument with their friend and like over some, be something really important or something kind of trivial that you're just kind of bickering back and forth with your friend at, knows that that's bullshit. Like, that's not how you, if somebody disagrees with you, that's not how you like explain yourself and try to explain why they're getting you wrong or whatever. Right,
but I honestly, I don't even think his preparedness even worked in this specific case, because it was just, he was expecting me to come in like all those others and bring up the same liberal tropes that these all got, feminism and the patriarchy. No, I knew that he was going to be expecting that. It was like blatantly obvious. And again, having me, a guy, go on debate him about that was not going to be effective. And B, it was not going to be effective because this audience and him don't care. Like, it was never going to convince them. So I went in and one of the moments that everyone likes from that debate, this was right after Elliot Rodger, that I guess the guy who I guess he's most known for being the guy incels have called Saint Elliot.
Or what is it, the ultimate gentleman or some shit like that?
The supreme gentleman or something like that, yeah. He's the guy who basically killed his roommates and then went on a shooting spree in the area outside his college campus because he hated women, because he couldn't get a date or something like that. And
what was weird about that guy, by the way? Like, because I'll just throw it out there that I can evaluate these things. I'm gay, and that guy wasn't bad to look at. His parents bought him like a late model BMW. If he had like half a personality, there's no way he would have had a hard time dating.
His dad was like a famous Hollywood producer or something like that. Yeah. So
it was his personality. It had to be.
Right. Exactly. Of course, it always is with these guys. And I want to point out again, he didn't just murder women. He shot men who he saw with women as well. Because, I want to make this point every time we talk about these guys. If you're a guy listening to this and you don't think, this is an issue, which A, is wrong to begin with, even if these guys weren't out to get you too, because you, again, have women in your lives you should care about. No, these guys, these incels and these sexist, misogynistic, right-wing reactionaries, they hate the men who they perceive as having what they don't have. So like you guys are in their crossfire as well. So their crosshairs, whatever, as well. So like this is something. If you're selfish and only care about yourself, you too should also care about this. But anyway, like so this was right after Elliot Rodger, and there was that manifesto Elliot Rodger wrote that came out after he killed himself. And I had noticed there really wasn't any difference between, and this is before Elliot Rodger was labeled an incel. I don't think he ever used that term. I think it might have even been before that term was widely known to even those guys. So the manifesto to me was very much in line with what a lot of men's rights activists preach and say and tweet and blog about. So specifically, Stefan Molyneux, who is this right-wing reactionary, who he isn't best known for his label as an MRA, but he is definitely embraced by that world, and he is a full-on hates women, misogynist, and he was invited to that MRA conference we were talking about earlier. And in my debate with Paul Elam, I said to him, allow me to read you we brought up Elliot Rodger, and I mentioned the manifesto, and I said to him, let me read you a quote. And what I read to him was actually a excerpt from one of Stefan Molyneux's YouTube rants, where he basically said women are evil and they're the reason for all the problems in the world. They're the reasons war happens. They're the reason any atrocity that's happening around the globe, it's because of women. So I read him that excerpt, and I asked him for his opinion on that. Ceded my time. This only took about 2 minutes, if even that. Told him this would not take up his 5 minutes. This would be part of my 5 minutes. And I asked him for a statement on that. And he said those words were disgusting. He wants to disassociate himself from that. He would never want anything to do with anyone who says anything like that. And then I pointed out to him that what I read to him was, in fact, not from Elliot Rodger's manifesto. It was from Stefan Molyneux, who he had just invited to speak at his men's rights conference. And he was not at all very happy that I had pulled one over on him.
Well, you didn't pull one over on him. I mean, you just read a quote. It's funny you mentioned Stefan Molyneux. They brought that up, and I remember seeing that in the chat when it happened. And he said that he was like, "It was very underhanded. I can't believe you would do something like that." It was really funny to me. So Stefan Molyneux was eventually going to come up. He's the guy who just says that everything isn't an argument, right? Like that's one of his things. He's like, "That's not an argument."
Right. I do think that's him. I used to follow him a lot more. But as this movement has grown, and that's the MRA movement, just the online right, these YouTube right wingers, these reactionaries, as they've grown, Stefan Molyneux actually has sort of fallen to the back of the pack. He's not as prominent as he used to be. There were people who played the game and were better at grifting and better at putting a happy face or a more digestible face and voice.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The people that were like less outwardly just straight up bigoted and sexist and shit than Stefan Molyneux, like people who were able to people whose dog whistle worked a little bit better. I think
this happened with a lot of these guys. Like Paul Elam's. No one's talking about Paul Elam anymore, really.
Well, good.
He's still exactly. But Candace Owens, who started out, her whole thing was that she was her YouTube name was Red Pill Black, and her whole thing was about being red pilled by she got into this whole the MRA movement and Gamergate and worked her way through all this stuff, and now she's a major conservative face. She's got a major title with Turning Point USA, and she's got Kanye West tweeting about her. I mean, some of these guys have figured out ways to work the system in their favor and make it so they're the stars now.
Well, I mean, it's good that Stefan Molyneux and Paul Elam have gone away, but you know, one of the things I kind of noticed, it might have been like 2000, right leading up to the election in 2016. I was like arguing with, as I'm ought to do, a Sam Harris fan, and they called me a cuck, and I was like, oh no, what's going on here? I was like, you know, I was being myself. I was like, oh no, you're a virgin, and
Right.
and now like some of the stuff, the men's rights lingo has been picked up in what the circles of the fucking great critical thinkers, like Jordan Peterson right now is a prime example. Like what he's saying is like exactly like message to them, but it just has he just tries to sound intellectual, but it's, you know, it's sort of almost entered the intelligentsia in a way, and it's really weird, I think.
Right. For a movement that so hates academia, and hates, you know, professors and teachers, it's funny how this guy has basically grown into this prominence simply because literally he has the professorial title in front of his name, which gives him some sort of authority, which is completely bullshit. But that is really, I mean, he's not saying anything new. He really isn't. But he's a professor, and he's written books, and he actually teaches classes. So, I mean, there you go. He's got to be some sort of intellectual. So that's really his whole shtick.
Right. It's just weird to see that veneer put on this thing that I've been watching for a while. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, what is this? What is Kermit the Frog crying about?
Right.
Like, it's the woman is chaos, and we need enforced monogamy and all. I'm like, oh no.
Like if he wasn't who he was, if he didn't have all those titles and all that built-in authority, what makes him any different from a Paul Elam or Stefan Molyneux? Nothing. Really nothing.
In fact, I'd say Stefan Molyneux is a better communicator than Jordan Peterson. Stefan Molyneux sounds sure of himself, and Jordan Peterson sounds like he's about to burst into tears at any second. Like,
right. That is true.
But I think that's part of that kind of professorial air where he sounds weird, right? So people think he's eccentric, you know, because he's rich and weird. So we just call those people eccentric. And I think that
right. No, he's just weird. He just doesn't. He's not sure of himself. He really doesn't know what he's talking about. He, he's not very smart. He's regurgitating stuff that's really isn't anything new, and not even just like right-wing talking points. Like, this guy is getting famous from fucking telling people in their early 20s to fucking clean their room. Are you kidding me? Like, that's okay. Why isn't like my grandma a prominent figure? Like, why didn't she write a book? She should have.
She's probably a lot nicer than that guy is. I don't even met her, but I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. Like, he's just pining away for the fucking 50s for like Mad Men and shit, right? Where because I saw this thing where he had said that if women don't want to be sexually harassed at work, maybe they shouldn't wear high heels or makeup. And I'm like thinking to myself, like how disconnected from reality are you? It was men who decided that that's what a professional woman would look like. Women didn't have a whole lot of choice in the matter. You're supposed to wear like kind of a skirt, not too slutty, but you also don't want it down to your ankles because then you're frumpy, and you got to wear enough makeup, but just not too much because then you don't want to look like a whore, but then again you don't want to look frumpy, and your shirt needs to be a little tight, but you don't got to look like Dolly Parton in it, but you also don't want to be frumpy. Why do you think and women in the office came up in a male-dominated thing, so they're dressing based on what's been expected of them over the last couple generations, and that's why they wear high heels and makeup.
Right. I mean, I now that you brought that up, I specifically remember. He also is someone who sort of lost prominence. I mean, he's still big on YouTube, but he's not a leader really in this wider reactionary movement anymore. Although he is I would say a central figure, at least online, and that's Sargon of Akkad.
Oh my God! I think is Sargon of Akkad the guy who got his Twitter channel or his Twitter pulled down, and then he did a YouTube live for like 8 hours about it. Is that Sargon?
No, No, that's Baked Alaska.
Oh, okay. It's I get my fucking douchebags confused. You know, Sargon went away because I think like talking shit about Anita Sarkeesian just has it's only got a certain amount of life, right?
But this guy was obsessed with me for a while. He did like multiple. Yeah, he.
Wait a minute. He talked to Michael Brooks, didn't he?
Right. Him and Michael had a debate. That's right. Yes. That was after I'd left. Yeah, but he was obsessed with me way before that, and he did numerous really long videos about me, like nothing personal, but attacking my what I would say about Gamergate or men's rights activists or the right wing in general. And one of the things I specifically remember is it was some sort of, he was attacking my view of how it really is only recently, and in many ways not even, women were viewed as chattel in this country. And he took a real problem. He had a real problem with that one. And his proof was that he found some sort of guidebook from like the mid 1900s or the early 1900s, which was like a how-to book for women. And it was about how they had to like do certain things when their husband invited company over or something. And he used that as proof, as like, how could women be chattel if this woman was able to take charge and plan the party and everything. And I was like, I never said this because I just ignored the video, but as I'm watching this, I'm like, this dude is so stupid. He doesn't realize that like this is a literal guidebook that was written telling women they had to do this shit. Like they had to plan the party if their husband wanted to invite their coworkers over, and this is what they had to do. Like this is like what was expected of them. Society expected them to do this. Like it wasn't a choice. And if you think like they got to plan the party that they like had to do, like if you think that was like empowering, like you're like so far off, dude. And again, this isn't exactly what the book was. I don't remember, this was so long ago, but that's basically what like his point was. And it wasn't even worth responding to. It was just so stupid. Like this is how these guys think. It's just like one dimensional. I
wish I'd have seen this. I wish I'd have seen this coming in the way that it did, because I'm kind of an asshole, and I could have fucking played the part, dude. You'd have been doing videos about me,
right?
I could have played the part,
right?
So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and maybe this isn't so much what you're looking at, but I've kind of noticed this stuff starting to kind of seep its way into like online atheism and skepticism in a lot of ways. Specifically like the hatred of political correctness as it's overused and probably understood. I don't know if you've sort of, I mean, obviously everybody knows that Sam Harris is hilarious and has no idea that he's hilarious, but it's not just him, it's his fan club, and it's, Michael Shermer's people and Richard Dawkins' people. And I was just wondering if, you had noticed that starting to bubble up, and if you had any thoughts on it.
Right. I mean, Sam Harris obviously has risen to prominence, and he's someone who, I think he's another one. He's one of these guys who always claims he's being taken out of context. Imagine that. Imagine having words so vague that you can pretty much say that someone who says this is wrong, and then someone who says a complete like 180 of that last guy is also wrong, because he's so like, his words have nothing behind them. He's purposely has this vagueness in what he says, so he actually can't ascribe to anything. There's no value in what he says. Always being misquoted, always being taken out of context. And this is a new thing that I've noticed. It started with Sam Harris. Jordan Peterson's doing this bullshit now. It's they say something and they say exactly what they mean, but they're able to use the right words, so it's just vague enough. It's just meaningless enough. But we who have been covering this stuff know what they're saying and know what they want, what they're saying to their audience, and we say it without the hidden language, and then they go, "Oh, you're misquote. That's not what I was saying." No, but I think, I do think like the new atheist movement has sort of also fallen back a bit. I think it was really growing, around the same time as Gamergate. I would say even when Gamergate was fizzling out, the new atheism movement was even gaining steam even more so. But then again, this whole, Trump became president, and the alt-right figures and the far-right, right-wing reactionaries, and the guys who, the conspiracy theorists, they sort of pushed all these more internet friendly reactionary movements to the side, because here you had these guys who also knew how to work the internet, but were speaking about things that your Fox News watching grandparents or parents would be susceptible to. So they really took that steam that was growing with those groups who were more geared towards internet issues that were mostly being talked about on the internet, and sort of made that stuff fizzle, or at least not be as prominent in the mainstream as they are. I don't really think new atheism to me is the same thing as like the people who only view themselves as gamers. That's their full on, complete, and only identity. You have these people who solely view themselves as atheists. They're nothing else. That is their whole. And they hate religious people, hate them. And when I say religious people, I don't mean like, the evangelical Christians who are attacking, who are pro-Trump and attacking LGBT people. And, no, I mean, like, they hate anyone who just mentions, like, we'll just pray once a week when something's going bad or something. Like, who cares? Like, it's not about that. Like, they hate Muslims. They,
especially
just,
that.
Right.
Like
that's
mostly
real,
that.
Yeah.
Mostly that.
Obviously, yes.
Mostly that. Just so we're being
right.
good. So just so we're
definitely.
Just so we have the full context.
It's a full-blown Islamophobic movement, absolutely. But they also love attacking every sort of religion, anything. To them, it's all the religion is the problem with everything. They think that the whole reason like there's war in the Middle East or there's terrorist attacks occurring is because of Islam and religion, without paying any attention whatsoever to the real issue. And it's all geopolitical, and they have no realization, or they refuse to even come to the truth, the fact that when religion is playing a part, it's simply being used in this context as a way for these groups who these people are basically using this religion to brainwash someone to do these things. That it's not actually, people aren't actually carrying this stuff out because Islam told them to. No, they use the people who are actually in charge, or they're the ones who want some sort of geopolitical play, some sort of power play, some sort of establishing their party as the government, or some sort of land grab or something like that. And they simply find the equivalent to our susceptible young white misogynistic gamer over here. They find the equivalent to that over there, and they use to brainwash them religion. It's that simple. I mean, it's not what they think it is, or they do know that, but they're using their Islamophobia to sort of, like a lot of these guys, grift and make money.
Right. The goal of the higher ups in something like ISIS is not to get to paradise. The goal is to get some fucking land and get some political power and impose their political will on others for their own personal gain or the gain of their group.
Right. They don't care about following their religion.
Some of those people may be deeply religious. Like, I'm not going to question somebody. Like, if somebody tells me they're a Muslim, I'm just going to believe them. But largely then that's irrelevant, and I almost forget about it in the case of people basically a paramilitary group waging war on the people of a region. they just said they're Muslim, but what's important is that there's a paramilitary group waging war on just random cities,
Right.
which seems like the actual problem.
Right. There's over 1 billion Muslims in this world. If the issue was Islam in general, and that was what was, actually doing these sorts of things when there is some sort of, person who's been radicalized in this way committing a terrorist attack, we would have a real problem if over 1 billion people in this world believe this stuff and wanted to attack America for its freedoms. There would be I think we would lose, actually, if there was 1 billion people ready to commit some sort of terrorist activity against this country. We would be in bad shape, I think.
Well,
so
and, I mean,
clearly it's not.
If 1 billion people... Oh, I'm sorry. If 1 billion people go on like a terrorist rampage, the humanity is fucked. It's not just us. Like,
oh, of course, yes.
And
but like, it's just like
what I was gonna say is, when people there's this, a lot of times people will use, because people know that I'm gay, and they'll try to use, like, some of these kind of right wing, especially new atheists, will try to like use gay people as like a pawn or a prop when they go, oh, well, how would you be being treated in Saudi Arabia? Why don't you care about that? Blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, the Muslims here or in America are more in favor of gay rights than the evangelical Christians, and those people live within a number of miles of me, and Saudi Arabia is on the other side of the planet.
Right.
So,
I mean, this is a bullshit. Like, there's so many ways to just pull that apart. But yeah, that's definitely, obviously, a major thing, to just throw that stupid talking point into the trash. Like, just debunk it right away. I mean, why don't we turning the table on them then, and being like, when they're going on some sort of, I don't know, stupid I can't even think of an example, but when they're doing one of their dumbass talking points, we should turn the table and be like, oh, why don't you care about this happening in New Zealand, or this happening in
Right, some guy who doesn't believe in God yelled at my mom yesterday. What do you have to say about that?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't believe in God, but I don't call myself an atheist, and I like to think that I use critical thinking when I think to do it, but I certainly don't call myself a skeptic anymore. I call myself a cynic now. I feel like it has a better connotation.
I'm in that same boat. I used to call myself an atheist, and then this whole movement grew, and I was like, I don't want to be associated with this anyway.
Well, I mean, that's what I am, but I just tell people I'm not religious or I don't believe in any gods. It's like, it's just as accurate, and because where I live, nobody really cares anyway.
But to me, the word atheist has been like completely like, it's you can't. To me, I automatically associate it with reactionary. I no longer look at it as like, oh, it's just a non-believer or someone who doesn't believe in God. No, to me, it's like completely like, you say you're an atheist, I got a question if you're going to start talking to me about throwing out some Islamophobia, or telling me about how women in video games are ruining the world,
right,
or something like that. So I don't even, to me, that word is irredeemable. Like, it's just done.
Especially if they tell you and you didn't ask, or they're wearing that shit on a t-shirt or something.
Right.
I used to wear t-shirts. I had t-shirts. It was like, I had a couple atheist t-shirts. I just don't really wear them anymore. They're a little bit old anyway, but yeah, it's really weird that, it seems like a lot of things that were otherwise not a super big deal, or some things that were even kind of good for society. Because I would say that, like, in the early 2000s, when more and more people who didn't believe in God were just telling everybody that they were atheists, I think that was probably a net gain for society, because then other people who didn't believe in God became more accepted and whatnot. But then that got trashed, and then, like, a lot of people have a lot of fun playing video games. I play some video games. I don't know anybody who never does, and then that got dragged through the mud by this roving, amorphous group of internet assholes, and it's getting tiring. I'm wondering what they're going to destroy next.
Right. No, it's going to be something.
Well, the internet's still brand new too, and especially with social media, like, it's kind of important to keep the perspective that this is, we're just babies on this, and it's gonna keep changing, and maybe things will get better one day. Oh no, I said maybe. I like, we've been. It's been a pretty depressing. Not pretty depressing, I guess. We haven't been talking about very nice things, so I thought I'd try to say a little something hopeful.
this is obviously part of the conversation, but we could probably go another hour and a half just on this. But seeing how Facebook and Twitter and all these social networks are dealing with all this stuff doesn't give me much hope for any sort of improvement. Even when they try to improve, it's just half-assed or not enough, or they even feel like they need to still, for some reason, also give in to the right on certain things, like why we're even talking about right-wingers being censored on Facebook when it's been proven to be complete bullshit. Like, it's just but of course Facebook has to give in and invite some sort of conservative organization to be part of their fake news checking on their site, and all this bullshit is just, as long as they keep giving in to the right and their fake outrage, I don't think the internet will get better when it comes to this sort of stuff.
It's funny you mentioned the outrage, because I've spent the last couple of years on the internet having people tell me that I'm fucking triggered whenever it's a way I think they try to control the conversation, because you go, hey, you know what, you're kind of an asshole, go fuck yourself, which is like, a thing that people say, and then they go, ooh, triggered, and you're like, dude, or they're like, oh, that's that's an ad hominem, and I'm like, well, fuck yeah, I just insulted you. I mean,
right?
It goes back to like when you were talking about going on Paul Elam's, how you didn't use these words, but what I took from it and what I noticed is that you kind of went in and attacked his character.
Right.
And people don't expect that. They think that they've already set the terms and that you're engaged in a polite, high-minded war of ideas. But if one of the people in the high-minded war of ideas happens to be a huckster, maybe the other party will just spend their time focused on that.
Right.
And yeah,
you brought it up before about just now about what was it they said to you? Triggered. Yeah. There's literally, in my mind, there's like a small dictionary of words, logic, reason, straw man, fallacy, ad hominem, triggered, obviously, snowflake. These are the words that they run to when they're in over their head.
Or when somebody just won't play by their rules, right? Because if I'm on Twitter, and I wrote a mediocre article about this a while ago, but if you're on Twitter and somebody comes to you expecting you to obey the rules of whatever high-minded debate they've imagined in their head, those people are fucking crazy. They have delusions of grandeur. Like, you owe them some kind of Socratic debate. It's absurd.
I agree with you completely, but when it comes to the usage of those words, to me, it's honestly 100%. When those words come into the conversation with someone, it's without a doubt because they don't know what to say. They've never had a conversation that took it beyond their talking points. They never had a debate where someone actually interacted and got to a point where I don't know what to say because I've never gotten this far. Because what I'm saying isn't actually something I came across myself and read about and believe, because it's something that I understand and learned and realized this was something I want or think describes me. No, it's just that these people have been played there. They've been grifted. They've been scammed. And whether it's Fox News or Breitbart or one of these reactionary organizations or talking heads, they listen to them, read them, watch them, whatever. They hear these talking points that are constantly repeated to them, and that is the whole of their ideology. There's nothing more to it. There's nothing underneath that. And those are the words that they've learned that when we say this, either A, it makes me sound smart, or B, I can deflect and make it seem like the person I'm talking to is getting emotional over it, or they care too much about it. And it's just like, it's all it is to me. When I see those words, it's like, oh, this person has run out of things to say. They don't know how to engage at this point.
Right. The ad hominem is the especially good one, because somebody will say that, and we've had people call into our show, and they said, "Oh, that's an ad hominem attack," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I don't think you have good character. I'm attacking your character."
Right.
And that they've never. That's just not. That's not in their realm. That's out of the circle they drew for whatever kind of discussion they think they're going to have with somebody.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just not, they most of these people who are, you have your grifters, your people who found out that there's a way to make money here. You have your true believers, your classic white supremacist Nazi groups who are, who go out there and actually, wear the robe or proudly display the swastika, who have no idea, no idea, but no care for how they're received by the general public. And then, like I said, the grifters who are smart and know how to say that stuff, but with a smiling face and not being so open and obvious about it. So they can appeal to people who would believe those things, but are turned off by the swastika and the Sig Heil. But then you have people who really they're not true believers, they're not grifters, they're the followers. They're the ones who either are being led by the grifters or the true believers, and those people far outweigh everybody else. The people who have there's nothing underneath it. It's just they were raised as bigots, or they were raised as sexists, or something happened and one time a black guy was mean to them and so they became racist or something. Those people are the ones who easily outweigh those others, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably a good place to end it. This has been great. I could have done this for 3 hours, but I would like to edit it down and put it out, and I have a few other things to do tonight. You've been listening to the Plex interview with, I'm producer Dave, and with me is Matt Binder of the Doomed podcast. Matt, one more time, where can people find your podcast?
Sure. You could find the podcast at doomedpod.com, or you can find the YouTube channel where I do the live stream at doomed.tv. And as always, the best place actually to probably keep on the up and up with either the podcast or anything else I'm doing is on my Twitter, twitter.com/Matt Binder, or just if you're on Twitter, just go to @Matt Binder.
All right. Thanks again, Matt.
Oh, thank you. This was a lot of fun.